What is wellness?
I think of the image of wellness as like pure joy.
The important thing is for people to choose, like, what do you want to do?
Wellness are the things your grandmother told you to do.
When you really start to think about it, the answer feels more complicated. I'm Maya Feller, registered dietitian nutritionist and author.
And I'm Dr. Kavita Patel. We're the hosts of Well Now, Slate's new podcast on wellness.
Join us every Wednesday as we tackle that simple yet important question, what does it mean to be well?
Edit audio.
My dad always used to say, work smarter, not harder. Now, I know that when he said that, what he really meant was like, take a look at the job at hand and be efficient and, all that jazz. But I've taken it to the next level in my life. It is now my mantra for so much of my life, including every work project I take on. Now, there is another great saying that unfortunately I cannot attribute to my dad. You take the money, you take the shit. When I think of that saying, I think of a time when a dude offered me all kinds of money for a gig overseeing a renovation. Now, I knew I could do the job. I knew it would be good money. And the poor girl in me really wanted to take the gig just because, more money will always feel better. But my analytical brain, the lady inside me who listened to her dad, also knew it would be all-consuming and quite possibly really bad for my soul. So I said no. I had less money, but on the upside, I didn't end up crying in stairwells. That was a win. Sometimes when trying to figure out that balance, you really got to check in with the old gut and trust yourself. The trick is knowing when to walk away and when you got to take the money and the shit. Hello, everyone. I'm Robin Hopkins, and this is Well Adjusting, where I talk to people about life stuff, but not in an NPR way. It's more like we're at the bar, having cocktails, getting into your business sort of way.
It's giving drunk NPR.
Oh, and producer Steph is here too.
Hello.
Today we chat, well, when your dream job doesn't quite pay enough. Hey folks, I am so excited for today's episode. As a person who has had a day job for years and years and years and struggled to pay the bills from my creative work, this is an episode that I'm just so excited to share. It is very near and dear to my heart. Courtney is a very successful journalist who finds herself in the position of loving the work that she's doing, but not necessarily making enough cash to feel comfortable in her life. So now she's got to decide, do I sell my soul to the corporate devil or keep doing what I'm doing and, vacation never? Or is there another option that she hasn't yet thought of?
Hi, I'm Courtney E. Smith. I am a writer and editor, and right now I work for Eater Dallas and Nevermind podcast. I want to talk about, am I happy with my work life? Because I've set up this whole sporadic life where I have a lot of freedom and everything I'm working on is creative, really. And I'm writing. And these are all things I've worked towards for a long time. But I still have a lingering sense of discontent about it. And I also have financial problems. I just don't earn enough money.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things I don't want. I don't want to work for a big multinational corporation anymore. I've done it a lot. I really have enjoyed working things that are more part-time than full-time. And I've managed to get that set up in a way where I have jobs with benefits and, I'm a member of a union. All of that's great. All the things I think I want are in place, but it's not quite enough money. And it makes me feel like I'm scrambling. And adding more work on is not really tenable. I'm doing the maximum amount of work that I realistically can do. So what is it that I want? This is what I thought I wanted. Was I wrong?
That's such a big question. And it's exciting because it's we're talking about work, we're talking about personal and how the intersections of the two. So let's start a little bit. You said you're a writer and that does lend itself to the freelance world. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I have one primary job that is part-time, 20 hours a week, and it's really fun. And it also leads me to doing a lot of going out to eat and socializing with people. So it gets me out of the house, which is great. A lot of doing interviews, love that. And then the rest of the time I do freelance stuff. So I work with a podcast company. I have a podcast out now called Songs My Ex Ruined. That doesn't really make us any money.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. And then I do freelance assignments too, like writing. A piece I worked on during the pandemic just got picked up by a literary magazine. And it was one that actually had money to pay instead of like you get a copy of the magazine. So that was really nice. But that's few and far between that you write those pieces. They're that immersive and there's actually a decent payment attached to it.
Yeah. You know what's really interesting about your question is I feel like a lot of times we get questions about work that are like, I hate what I'm doing, or I don't know what I want to do. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you love what you do.
I do.
You're doing the things you want to do. It's the money that's the issue.
Exactly. Like creatively, I feel so fulfilled. I love everything I'm doing. I've set myself up to do projects like this, but the money just hasn't come together yet.
Yeah. So what's interesting to me is I feel like we're going to talk a bit about a couple of things, but like one of them is visioning. And that's not something we've touched on a lot. Like I call it the Great Robin Plan, which Steph has heard me talk about a lot. Like I have the Great Robin Plan. It is a Word doc. It is, of course, color coded. It is purple because I was always a Prince fan.
Sure.
And I update the Great Robin Plan. I try to look like a year out and then I update it quarterly with goals. And what's similar about where you and I are is we're in businesses where we don't get to say we get this job. Like someone else has to hand you the job. And oftentimes it's for not a lot of money. And so there's a real like day job component that has always been a part of my creative life. But your writing is so significantly, that takes a lot of time. Right. For maybe not quite it's like if you probably broke down your hourly rate, it would be low.
Yeah.
For the work.
Lower than I would ever want to admit. Yes.
Exactly. Don't do the math. No. But so I want to ask you, like, are you doing any kind of like Great Courtney plan? Do you have anything like that? Have you considered anything like that?
You know, I really haven't. I tend to live very much in the moment with my career, and the nature of working in the media is that more and more as my career's gone on, jobs are short term. Like you can count on maybe 5 years out of something.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult to imagine like, oh, what I want to do is, you know, this or that, because that job may or may not be available. And once you get it, you may or may not have it for very long. So other than thinking, I published one book and I want to publish a second one, and that's in my vision board. And I've applied during the pandemic. I started applying for National Endowments for the Arts grants for
that's interesting.
Nonfiction writing. Yeah. And I would like to win one of those at some point. So that's on my board.
Here's what's interesting. What you're speaking on is like carving out the time and the specificity of it, right? Like, so there's like two things you just talked about, like a grant or, you know, an endowment or jobs that are going to disappear. But I think that the Great Courtney doc would be a living, breathing, evolving thing. And I think what's really wonderful about doing something like that, because again, like my current Robin doc is very weird because it's like, I'm just like, I'll book 3 commercials this year. Like it might just be me putting a sense of control on an out of control thing. Like that's the one side of it. But on the other side of it, tasks do come out of it. So by setting it up and saying like, all right, in the writing world, I'd like to have someone give a shit about my book proposal. In the acting world, I would like to have a legit agent. I would like to book some more commercials. This year, I added a self-care section because I was like, I am not taking care of myself. And sometimes I think just the writing down of the things, then I'm like, I think of tasks I can do that will get me to this ambiguous goal.
That's really smart. And I like that you've explained it as not just career oriented. I mean, I've added self-care in the form of a few different therapies this year instead of just the one. So a lot has come up there. That's a big part of why I don't want to add more work to my work schedule, because prioritizing myself and healing is way more important than capitalism at the moment. But, you know, you still have to make I have my monthly Excel sheet budget of that's the number I have to be.
The budget's
making.
real.
The budget's real. So that's really interesting to like break it down into different sectors like that and give yourself tasks you can complete, because I like the idea of it being more holistic than just this one thing, because it turns out all these things are interconnected. Like all these decisions are connected to each other.
They are 100%. I was just thinking about the endowment piece, just by putting that down, right? And saying, by this time next year, I'm going to have gotten an endowment. By putting that down, by writing it, what happens for me anyway, is that then all of a sudden I start to think, well, God, I did all of this work for the application for that, because I'm sure that's a buttload of work to just like say why you deserve it, what you're going to use it for.
Couldn't be more difficult to use. Like they couldn't have built something more difficult.
But if you put that down as a bucket, and if you're saying I'm committing that I'm going to get this in a year, which you may or may not, but why not fucking say it? Then you might be like, oh, well, there's this other endowment. You might start talking to people about it. And then, and a lot of that work will be similar, and you'll be able to pull from this application process and add to that. So you may add specifics. I think there's really something about stating, I think this is a real revenue source I can get, and I'm going to go after it. And I'm going to commit an hour a week on that.
Yeah.
In doing that, then I have to create tasks. I'm like, okay, well, if I want to be here in a year, well, then this beginning part, I'll need to be researching and finding other grants to apply for.
Well, what this is pulling out for me is that when I was laid off during the pandemic from a media job, I made a document sort of like this because I was a little at loose ends about what to do. And there are all these things I haven't kept up with it because I felt like I haven't had the time, but like I wanted to have the New York Times accept a modern love piece from me.
Oh God, that's been a goal of mine forever.
Yeah,
Fuckers.
they say no too much. I have a lot of bucket list publications I'd like to be in, but I find what I'm actually doing is I'm on these mailing lists with calls for pitches, and I tend to pitch towards the things that random publications are looking for right now because it's more immediate, it's easier to get accepted. But if I went back to my pandemic list and updated it for the present, then I could spend a little more time thinking about pitches and focusing on the publications that I specifically want to be in, like carving out some time to target them, which I definitely haven't been doing.
Yeah, because by the way, Modern Love would help sell your book proposal, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, people. Raise your hand if you have ever been personally exhausted by email, right? Same, friend, same. We're all so constantly inundated with email. And if you're like me, going through your inbox becomes less about responding to everything and more about just finding a way to keep tabs on the messages that really matter, like the ones from the school telling me my kids are in trouble that I get all the time. Anyway, that's where SaneBox comes in. Think of it as an EMT for your email. As messages flow in, SaneBox does the triage for you, sifting only the important emails in your inbox and directing all the other distracting stuff, you know what I'm talking about, into your Sane Later folder. So you know what messages you need to pay attention to now and what stuff you can get to like eventually after maybe a nap or, a cocktail. It also, and I know I'm waxing poetically, but it has some very handy features like the Sane Black Hole, where you can drag messages from annoying senders that you never want to hear from again. Bye, friend. Oh, and it also has Sane reminders to ping you if someone hasn't replied to your email by a certain date. I mean, nothing like having to follow up on your follow-up, am I right? All right, best of all, you can use SaneBox with any email client or phone anywhere you check your email. I mean, come on. See how SaneBox can magically remove distractions from your inbox with a free 2-week trial. That's a deal. Visit sanebox.com/well today to start your trial, and you're going to get a $25 credit. That's sanebox.com/WELL. Go ahead, folks. Get it. How is your, because I do think that part of this is hits in the time management, because there's visioning, then there's time management. How is your time management? Are you pretty good with that?
I used to be great at it, and then I slipped into perimenopause, and I have brain fog so often now, and I can't multitask as well as I used to be able to. it's just harder to keep up with the to-do list. And I've had to like seriously downgrade how much I can get done in a day because it doesn't feel like as much anymore. I don't even know if that's true. Like I might still be doing as much, or I was doing too much previously, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But now it just feels like I really feel the limitations on my time, and I feel the limitations on my brain's ability to manage time.
Do you have a time in the day when you are best and most productive?
Yes, in the morning between like 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. for sure.
Well, so what if you took a period of that time, like a half hour in the mornings, like when you're your best, your freshest? Or by the way, I'll be interested to hear what you think about this, because it could also be like that's a later in the day task when it doesn't take as much. But like, I think visioning requires a fresh like state. But like, what if you said every day from 8 to 8:30, I will only be doing tasks related to the Great Courtney Plan, related to financial freedom, related to moving this forward to get to where I want to be. Would that be something that helped?
That could be something that helped. And it could also pair with like, I'm trying to build a morning ritual where I eat breakfast without being in front of a screen or like doing work at the same time. And
goals.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I could see packaging those two things together.
Yeah. And I also think, I mean, just like the brain fog, like I'd make another huge pitch for like an Asana type tracker, Monday, any of those boards, because like I put mine in buckets. So I have the wellness bucket, and then I put tasks under each one of those, and then I deadline them. And the deadline shifts all the time. I mean, full disclosure, like setting my career up for success is the last thing. Like there's things that have to be done on the day to day, like I've got to record this episode. I've got to do a social media post. I've got to do this, but I try to build in time in the day for that too, or in the week. Cause it's like, it may not always be realistic. Like sometimes that gets pushed.
That's an interesting shift. I use an app called Todoist, but I only put in there things I've actually committed to and need to get done, and not future casting. So that would be like very doable. The idea of doing it every day would be new for me because I tend to do it really sporadically.
Yeah.
But that could be a good ritual to prioritize myself instead of prioritizing just keeping up.
Yeah. And you can do it however you work. So if you're a sporadic worker and you're not someone who's like, I do 15 minutes every day of something, you could just say, this week I will have found one other grant that I can apply for. Maybe you go into Wormhole and you spend 90 minutes on Monday, but then you do nothing on Tuesday. But like however it works for you, I think understanding how you think, understanding like something as simple as getting the tracker email saying like this deadline's coming up is like, oh, fuck, I haven't done anything on that. Yeah. I have not done anything this week toward this other goal. I find that really helpful.
Yeah. I find that I tend to end up pushing things when I've overcommitted myself.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that's really difficult to manage with this sort of career that I hadn't thought through all the way, is that things come in when they come in, and deadlines are arbitrary and kind of hit you whenever they hit you. So it's kind of demoralizing to push yourself back so much, but you end up doing it.
You're up against a real deadline of cash.
Yeah. That's bleak, but accurate.
Well, but maybe it's not bleak. Maybe it's just a hard deadline. Like sometimes we need things to force us to do things. And if that's the thing that helps you prioritize yourself, because you are so, like I said, so different from a lot of folks, you already have all the joy in your work and the excitement in it. It's just right now not netting out to your mortgage.
Well, so here's the existential question I've been asking myself.
Ooh, I love an existential question. Go.
Deeply depressing. I mean, you and I have both worked at multinational corporations, and I've worked at several. And in 2015, for the first time, I worked for a privately held media company. And now that's all I work for. Like all of my, other than, random freelance things I'll pick up, they're all like small private companies. And I so prefer that because the smaller ecosystem really gives you this space to explore and try things out, and everything hasn't been done already. And it's not so much constantly about what investors think.
Yeah.
But now I'm kind of at the place where I'm like, well, because of the limitations of getting older in the workforce and the way that it limits my cognitive abilities and my energy. Would it be smarter for me to just go for some soulless, high-paying job now and tuck the money away and work harder on not pinning my identity to my job and find happiness outside of work and get the money back?
That's a really big question.
Yeah, it's difficult to grapple with because since I left MTV and since I pivoted to being a writer full time, so much of my identity has been tied up in what I'm writing and what success in that looks like. And I love it and hate it. Sometimes you get the nicest feedback or you get the great accolade or you get to publish a book and it's really cool. And sometimes it's just a daily grind of, making content, making the donuts. So I mean, it's hard to decide what would be smarter. I mean, under capitalism, the smart move is making all the money and tucking it away to protect yourself. But that's also the very, very boring move and not fulfilling move.
Is that smart because we live in a capitalist? Is that smart to you or is it smart to most people?
I mean, financially, it's smart to me. It's practical. It makes sense. Yes.
Well, I feel like this is a big part where visioning comes in because, what do they say? You take the money, you take the shit. So it's like you could go right back to that. And as I've gotten a little bit older, I've been like, oh, I want to work with people I like to be respected and to be treated well and to have an environment where I'm coming into work and it's good, So it's like, does that outweigh it? But I feel like in a way, only you can answer that question because you need to really think about, would that take your soul? Would that crush your soul to show up? I mean, talk about time to make the donuts.
Yeah. And to mitigate, a part of the decision making for me is I'm not married. I don't have kids. I'm not going to pivot to my mommy blogger identity. I'm not going to turn to this huge family life of people that need me. I am the one that fulfills me. So to have a job that's not fulfilling, I mean, I could put in a lot of work in developing hobbies or write on the side or, whatever feeds my soul and creativity.
But that goes by the wayside for so many people.
That's
they don't end up doing it because they're just tired from their dumb day job and phoning it in.
Exactly. So knowing that that's very much a possibility of how that turns out. If my whole identity is I write corporate comms for KFC or something.
Yeah.
Would I want to die? Maybe. Even in my fantasy life, I only take some corporate job for a couple of years, 5 at the max, pay off every debt I have. And as soon as I have none, I'm out. I'm back to doing this because it's so much more what I'd rather be doing.
Is there a hybrid option?
I feel like this is the hybrid option, Yeah. I mean, I guess I could try harder at taking on some kind of branding, consulting, content creation stuff. That also makes me want to die. Honestly.
No matter how much money you have, I think if you're doing work that fulfills you, there's always going to be more money you can make and there's always going to be more money you can spend and there's always going to be, more jobs that you can take on. Obviously it depends on how secure you are just living your day-to-day life, but I don't know. I look at just the three of us and we have all very different jobs. And I think all of us can relate very strongly to this.
Yeah.
It's I do the soul sucking job for more money or do I do the thing that is going to make me feel good to wake up in the morning? And I think that line just kind of keeps pushing.
It doesn't seem to ever go away, that question. Could you pick up some of the soul sucking a little?
Yeah, I mean, for the duration of needing to pay off debts, I definitely could start picking up a little bit of work that I don't care about deeply.
Yeah.
I just want to ask, the debt, because, I think also, at least speaking for Robin and I, we both have, some money trauma, maybe?
A little bit.
Sure.
And so, sometimes the debt isn't as real as it feels. And I just want to get clarification that the debt for you is, very real in your life.
The debt is credit card debt. Yeah, I did some home improvements when I bought this house, and that will be paid off in 2 years. That will be done. But then there are 2 other credit cards. I would say probably $15K in debt. It's not terrible, but it's annoying. Oh, and another $4K for another home improvement loan.
I'm going to call it more than annoying. 20K. I'm going to call that more than annoying.
It is, but it all fits into my monthly budget at this time. Like I don't have a problem making the bottom line nut amount.
But you're not getting extras.
I'm not getting extras. Like I can't travel. I can't save very well. I haven't been putting anything into my IRA.
Retirement.
Yeah.
You're not in an easy field to be successful in. And for you to be able to hit your monthly expenses and to be able to be setting this up to do the work that you love and to be true to yourself, that's no small thing that you should be celebrating. And we talk regularly about not celebrating ourselves enough on this podcast.
Well, that's why it makes the conversation about should I step aside for a few years and take another job such an existential conversation, because it truly is no small it was not easy to get here. It took me a while of setting myself up to get into this position. And it's just that it works, but it doesn't quite work, you know?
Right. But, you know, I have to be honest, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, and Steph will definitely if I'm wrong, but she keeps me honest. But I don't think you want to do that. I'm not hearing it.
I don't want to do that, but I'm asking if I have to do that.
I don't think you have
if
to.
That's the thing that makes the most sense.
I really, truly don't think you have to. And I think oftentimes the logical thing, and this may not be true for everyone, but for you, because you are responsibly working towards your financial situation to make sure your setup gets better. You are, building something for your career. I don't think you have to. I think there are small adjustments, like taking a couple soul-sucking gigs more frequently, like just, I keep obsessing about the endowment or grants, but it's like, as soon as you start out of the box thinking, other ideas are going to come to you. That might be alternative revenue sources that may not just be writing. You have a lot of skills and you're obviously incredibly educated. So I think when you start looking, other things are going to appear that are other solutions. It would hurt my soul to see you give up all of the progress that you've made in laying out this thing that really fulfills you because you just can't quite see it yet.
Yeah, it's true. It would hurt my soul too.
I think maybe a good exercise would be like to write down today what you think like the most soul-sucking thing would be that you like can't do.
I already know the answer.
Great. Then share it if you're comfortable.
It would be corporate blogging. Anything where you have to like write in the voice of a CEO.
Okay.
Yep.
So like defining that, I think, is important, at least for me, because like I think back to like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and like maybe I needed this amount of money and I would have taken on this and thought that was soul sucking. And now like the line has changed. Mm-hmm. But I think defining like what makes you feel okay to do and is worth the money is important. I'm like, how much of a pain in the ass is this? Both from like a work perspective, a talent perspective, a like training my team perspective. Is it beneficial or is it just breaking even? If my emotions are money, like, am I breaking even on this or getting more from it? And I always want to be getting more from it. That was a very long-winded explanation to tell you.
It was great. It was
that
great.
That's a
your
really
feelings
good
are worth money
yardstick.
too.
Yes, your time is worth money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's a really good yardstick because the kind of writing I've been doing, you're kind of trained to expect minimal pay. So I don't really think about like if I did something as a one-off or as just a part-time thing, what would it look like? What would my bottom line, because I don't care about it, be to like how much money would you have to pay me for this to be okay?
Yeah. And I'm also going to take it a step further and say, I would love to see you really, I mean, it's weird to say journaling because you're already a writer. You might be like, it's like the contractor coming home and fixing his own bathroom. But like, but some form of visioning. I mean, you already have a setup that makes you happy, but like visioning, like what is the perfect setup? What's the thing where I'm going to make the money? I'm going to have the fulfillment. Like, what are those things that will contribute to that? Because those are things that can then be project tracked. But you have to start with the visioning.
Yeah. The obvious answer is like selling ideas to Hollywood because they pay a ridiculous amount of money. So adaptations of work that already exists or ideas that already exist. And there are a couple of things on the table that I just haven't had the time to follow up on it. But I think if I started doing this and visioning and tracking, then I would be like, this is actually potential money for IP left on the table that I should be prioritizing because it could be a significant amount of money.
Yeah, you're just keeping the lights on right now. You're just like, you're hustling from this gig to that, and there's not the planning. The planning needs to be added in, and that time needs to be built into your schedule. Like, I can't harp on that enough. You've got to be kind to yourself because there'll be times when it gets pushed, but you have to really get in there and say, I spend this amount of my day future planning.
Yeah.
You know, and what's funny is I think about when I first met Steph, she was talking to people who wanted to be editors, and it really stuck with me. I don't think I've ever told you this, Steph, but she said, you know, you can't just take 40 hours a week and times it by your hourly rate and say, this is how much money I'll make, because you need to build in time for there'll be billing, there'll be emailing. There's all this like non-billable work that you have to do. I think you need to think about Courtney as your non-billable work, and you need to put in 15% of your week, if possible, like whatever the percentage is that you feel like you could get some stuff done, where you'll be doing your non-billable work that just is part of your planning.
And what's so interesting about capitalism is it's very easy for a company to define that and ask for it, but it's less easy to do it as someone who works for themselves or as someone who has like an arts background. And
Completely.
I think that is an important thing to remind yourself when you're doing it, because often it comes down to a worth thing. And well, if I'm enjoying this work, I don't deserve to be paid for it as much or something.
Yes.
You know, I have been telling people for the better part of a decade that success for me would be making a living from my creative work. And I started making a living from my creative work and didn't know it happened. Like, I was like in the middle of like I was like, holy shit, I hit this massive life goal. And I was so hell-bent on what's that next thing I'm going to get that I didn't even notice I hit it.
It's not a lie, by the way. This was your goal, and you stated it explicitly when we worked together 20 years ago.
Yes.
For real.
And the moment came, Courtney, and I just was already like, well, now I need a legit agent. Like, it's just like, just fucking stop it, you asshole. Like, so I said to Mary, I said, oh my God, I just realized I hit that goal. And I was like, we should go, like, let's go get a drink or something. Like, I have to do something to celebrate this. Yeah, and then I think we forgot to go. But I'm celebrating by saying it right now.
We're going out this week.
We're going out.
But that's the thing, like, the line always changes.
The line always changes.
So Robin and I often talk about, like, I have no goals. Some people have, like, a 10-year plan and, like, a 20. Like, I'm just, like, trying, and I think I have kind of fluid goals that I try to get to, but I've never built the roadmap. And so to me, that feels very scary. But since talking about this more with Robin and with my many therapy systems, I've worked on this thing that is similar to what Robin's saying about like putting time aside. And what I've done basically is put like I have 5 buckets. So they're like relationships, my health and body, my career, money, like my money planning. And I make sure that every day in the morning when I have my coffee, I just have this list of 5 things and I look at them and I'm like, am I doing something? Like, am I present in all 5 buckets of my life this week or today? That's my way of just like making sure it's top of mind, and hopefully that will develop into like some sort of goal setting thing. But I think, if you put like, my debt, my creative fulfillment, I don't know what your 5 buckets are, but put them there and just like look to them. I think you would see that you're actually doing a lot. I mean, it sounds like you're doing a lot on all of them.
I mean, it's true, and it's exhausting. And I like the point Robin brought up earlier about giving ourselves credit. Like, this is something I've been thinking about in terms of interpersonal relationships. Once again, in therapy, where if you're taking stuff out, you have to be replacing it with something. So the things that I've been taking out of my life, like what's the happy stuff I'm replacing it with, and just seeing the shape of things. So to think about like this being one of 5 buckets, that's really smart. That's really an interesting way to look at it, and also give yourself time to give yourself credit for everything that you are doing.
Yeah, and some days it sucks because I'm like, well, I didn't really do anything for my relationships in a while, but
That's
that
okay
sucks,
because
but
you
it's
did
like,
something
well,
in
the other
another
four-
bucket,
exactly.
and that all counts. That's all important.
I think we solved it for you, so that's great.
I do too. I think you gave me a lot of actionable ideas here, and I think I'm kind of excited. I'm really interested in ways to make my life more about myself and less about all the things everybody demands from me or the commitments that I've made. So I really like this direction a lot. It really goes along with the themes in a lot of other areas outside of my career. So thank you.
And I do not want you to take the soul-sucking corporate job. I just want to say that again. I do not want you to do that. And I think that you don't have to. Tell people where they can follow you and where they can listen to Songs My Ex Ruined, which, by the way, I was a guest on, and it was so fun.
True.
It was such a fun conversation.
It was so good. You were such an amazing guest, and everybody should come listen to that episode. They can find it wherever they listen to podcasts out there in the wild world. And you can find me on Twitter at Courtney E. Smith, or on Instagram at the Courtney E. Smith, because I took too long to claim my name there.
Well, thank you so much, Courtney. This was so wonderful.
Thank you.
You have reached the well-adjusting expert of the day.
Hi, my name is Daniel Thrall, and I'm the host of the podcast Friends with Tax Benefits. I also work at Intuit TurboTax. Before working at TurboTax, I was a high school English teacher in a state that didn't pay teachers very well, so I can 100% relate to the dilemma of loving one's job, but feeling like I wasn't making enough money. When I was teaching, I took another teaching job, teaching Saturday school. I also worked summer school, and because I was tech savvy, I got paid extra actually to be the school software administrator. None of these, side gigs made me rich, but they definitely supplemented my income in a meaningful way. And the important thing was I used my strengths and my skills to get these extra income streams. So the important thing is that a side hustle, it doesn't have to mean, driving rideshare. If you like cooking or baking, you could put out some ads for catering gigs. And that's what I encourage you to do, is to supplement your income with gig work by pursuing something that you're good at or that you feel passionate about. Another piece of advice is to budget. And hear me out. I think people think budgeting, oh man, it's going to make me miserable. But budgeting has been financially the best thing I've ever done. There are many different products to choose from. And the software I use allows me to create envelopes for every category of spending. For example, dining out or gas or electricity or clothing, whatever. And when I get paid, I put my money into these digital envelopes. And as I go through the month, when the envelope is empty, I stop spending in that category. And so this budget, instead of making my finances feel constrained, they actually now feel unconstrained. We can go out to eat as much as we want, as long as there's money in the dining out category. But there's still flexibility, because if my dining out category is empty and I still want to go out to dinner, I have to ask myself, okay, should I move money from the mortgage category? No. The phone bill category? No, because I have to pay those things. But what about the clothing category? Well, sure, I don't need any more clothes this month. And so I'll move money from my clothing category to the going out for dinner category, and then we get date night. The last piece of advice that I'll give you is just to consider that there are probably many, many jobs that you could end up loving. I loved being a teacher, but I couldn't afford to save for my kids' college. I never had enough money to go on a single vacation in the 9 years I was a teacher, because we had all kinds of graduate school loans. But I was worried that if I switched careers, I'd be miserable. And that has not been the case at all. Reach out to people, LinkedIn, or people, friends of yours who have this job, and ask them about a day in the life. Even better, could you shadow them for the day? If you're changing to a better paying job and it requires going back to school, it's so important to look at whether you'll have a good return on that investment. And also just keep in mind that there are many, many jobs out there that you might consider a dream job, even ones that pay well.
One takeaway tip, folks, and I cannot stress this enough. If you are at a place in your career where you're working towards goals, whether they're, financial, a promotion, or a career shift, make sure to schedule time in your day where you're doing work on the project called you. Yes, I know I said this loads of times in the middle of the interview, but it bears repeating because you would be amazed at what you can do in just 30 minutes a day. Get those goals. All right, that's it for today, folks. But before we go, I do want to say so many thanks to Courtney for just, getting into it with us. And I got to give a huge shout out to Daniel for jumping in as our expert of the day today. Thank you for all your advice. For more Robin, and you may need that, you probably don't need it, but if you do, you can follow me at Real Rob Hops on all the platforms, all the socials, as the kids today say. Well Adjusting is an Edit Audio original, exec produced by Steph Colburn and Robin Hopkins. Thank you to Maria Passingham, Kathleen Speckert, and the whole Edit Audio team. Oh, hey, before you take out those AirPods, this show is just for entertainment. If you are in need of help, please, please, please reach out to a professional. Go ahead and get that help. You deserve it.